Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization podcast, brought to you by the Malfers Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
And let us know also in the comments just where you're from too. Love to know where everybody is joining in from.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So today we're going to be talking through just 5 of the 10 things that are in this checklist, and we'll give you the URL for that checklist by the end of this episode. But we're going to talk through 5 things, and let's just dive straight in. We don't need to waste time. AJ, hit me with number 1. What's the very first action that we need to start taking right now to be ready to reopen when we're allowed to reopen?
Yeah, well, it's probably the most obvious, but maybe we can hit you with a couple of details just to make sure you kind of think through all of those things. But this is having an enhanced cleaning regimen in your church. Okay, we've all become accustomed at this point now to washing our hands because apparently we never did previously. It's a new thing that we wash our hands and we use hand sanitizer. And we're going to have to go above and beyond that in our churches for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the first one is we don't want people getting sick. We don't want things getting passed around. The way the virus works is still very not necessarily unknown, but unclear about who has symptoms, who doesn't have, when they're contagious, who might get it. And so out of an abundance of caution, and making sure that people feel safe on our campus, which we would want to do all the time anyway, we're going to have to increase the way we clean things. And so, Scott, we've kind of talked through a few details maybe for you to be considering.
Yeah, I think the first thing that we want to talk about is that, above and beyond is what you said, and that's really important. And I think you need to start thinking through how we can do these cleaning regimens per space. So think about every single space in your building that would potentially be used on a Sunday morning, and create a customized cleaning plan, sort of pre-service, during or in between services if you've got multiple services, and after service, and print off a cleaning checklist for every single space. In fact, I know that a lot of churches already have similar things for like for a room setup. Like I go to a lot of churches and there's like a little checklist for here's how to reset this room before you leave. It's the same sort of idea with just a cleaning checklist. Here are all the things that need to happen. Here's who needs to do what, and have one of those for each space and post it in a visible spot. It's not, yes, it's a good thing to have from a practical perspective, but it's a good PR move for you to have this very visible cleaning checklist available for every single space, and that's be something that the people who are attending your church see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, and hello to Ken from Kokomo, by the way. I just had to say that because my wife was born in Kokomo, Indiana, so that's cool. We're coast to coast and north to south on the live right now.
Yeah, upstate New York, a couple folks in New York, California, Minnesota. Yeah, glad to have you guys here.
Yep. Hey, New York, man, we've been talking with several people over there, and of course, we're praying for you guys. Really hope that you're able to begin seeing the light at the end of the tunnel here soon.
Yes, 100%. AJ, a good point that you made off air before we started was that you really need to engage your cleaning regimen needs to engage more than just whoever was doing cleaning before. You maybe have a part-time facilities person, or maybe you have contracted out a cleaning company to come in or whatever. This is really enhanced means enhanced number of people helping with that as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be all hands on deck. Whatever adults are responsible for whatever that space is, whether it's a children's classroom or a Bible study room or the bathrooms, anything, I think you're going to need to employ a greater volunteer effort. And I don't think people are going to push back against that. I think people always step up when there's necessity, right? Don't you find that in your church? I know we do in ours, and this is going to be one of those things. And it's not going to require a ton of stuff, but we're going to be talking about, hey, before and after doing things, depending on what the situation is, maybe something also during some kind of programming time happening, but you're going to need to just bring everybody in that's a part of whatever their space is and train them up. Like you said, Scott, have a checklist of what needs to be done so that everybody just knows this space has not gone very long without being cleaned again.
So when would be the right time to start, not just making those checklists, but sort of planning for having extra cleaning supplies like Lysol wipes and not a sponsor, Clorox wipes, Lysol.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't shopped Amazon in a little while, go on there and see what your options are for buying Lysol and hand sanitizer. So these are in limited supply. Don't wait until next month when you hear what your governor is going to say about when you might be able to meet. And you're thinking, okay, what looks like June or August for us. Just start looking right now, because if something is 5 weeks out on shipping, go ahead and place that order.
Yeah.
And just check back weekly, because you need to not only just think what do we need for week one, but just start to develop. No, don't hoard. TMG's not telling you to start hoarding.
Yes.
But get yourself a supply so that you're ready. And, over the next 6 weeks, probably we'll be able to start maybe getting a feel for what the market is going to provide for us in cleaning supplies, so that you can just be ordering a reasonable amount for usage. But you're probably going to need to start now. So be looking for those.
Yeah, a good way to put it, AJ, would be April and May are to cleaning supplies what February was to toilet paper. Like, if you had known that in March there was going to be the toilet paper run, you would have not have hoarded, but you would have had a couple of packs on hand in February. So you need to be thinking that way about cleaning supplies, because trust me, the second they start saying, hey, businesses can reopen, churches can reopen, people are going to be trying to gobble that stuff up. So be ahead of the curve. And like AJ said, don't hoard it, but get what you need for the foreseeable future. Okay, let's move on to the second thing. And again, this is part of a checklist. We have 10 things in the checklist. We're covering 5 today in this podcast. But the second thing that we're going to address is develop additional worship services or worship venues. So let me frame this, because I know that a lot of the folks that tune in are in smaller churches of 100 or 150 people. And you might be thinking, I don't need more services, right? But the reality is that when these orders begin to be lifted, we don't know, and it's going to vary state to state and locality to locality, but we don't know what the restrictions are going to be on size. And so you might be able to reopen sooner. Let's say you're a church of 150 or 100. Let's make it really simple. If you're a church of 100 people and the restrictions are you can't have groups of more than 50, well, if you go to 2 services, you can reopen a lot quicker versus waiting until they say groups of 100 are okay. So start thinking through, what would it look like to add either additional worship services, or some of the churches that I'm talking to, it's not additional services, but additional venues. So services happening at the same time, but in more than one location, so that they can get that number of people in one space lower. So some of your churches that have fellowship halls that go unused, you could host a concurrent service down there at the same time as you are having service in the sanctuary. Some of you have new sanctuaries and then like an old sanctuary that you don't use anymore. It's like a chapel now. You could look at running multiple services in different venues at the same time. So I think we need to start thinking about what are some creative ways that we can get our group numbers in one particular physical space down so we can reopen sooner. What are your thoughts on that, AJ?
Yeah, absolutely. Utilizing your space certainly is first. A lot of you have started doing the drive-in church thing. You could keep doing that. Half your people could get out of their cars and go inside, right, and some of the others stay in their cars. And of course, online church. This is here to stay. If you've been thinking, well, we'll get through this for a few months, no. Just change your plans right now and say, from now on, we're also offering online church. Right. It needs to stay. So to just plan on that, but what you can do to minimize maybe workload on tech staff and things like that is start streaming live. So if you're going to have 1 or 2 Sunday morning services, just stream live on that. Because the other thing that we need to consider here is that not all of the population should start reattending live. Just because you can doesn't mean you should in all cases. So, maybe it's going to be more of your younger congregation, healthier congregation that is first able to come back together. And then not until later that maybe our folks that aren't in secure health or in an older population would be able to come back. So those folks still need an option, and online is really going to be your best way to fulfill that. So keep meeting online, plan on improving that, but maybe instead of recording, you're working on Thursday, Friday, trying to record and then get ready to broadcast, just go live. That way they get to meet at the same time as everybody else that gets to be there gets to see it. And then of course you'll have a recording for later when people weren't available or just want to watch it later. But so I think, I'm super proud of all these that jumped on drive-in church. I just think that was really kind of cool. That was kind of a quick out of the box thing that from what the feedback I've been seeing, people actually really kind of like that. But you could just set up a screen and the audio and things and just have that running in your parking lot while waiting inside as well. But I think these are some reasonable ideas to minimize your people getting too close to one another after we can reopen.
Yeah, you should assume that you're going to have to get creative on this stuff and not wait on it. Like, have a plan. If we had to have an additional worship service or an additional venue that was in person, what are we going to do? And how are we going to execute that? And don't wait until you get the word from the governor on when you can open. Start working on that right now. You can start working on that today. So start thinking through additional worship services or additional worship venues. Want to let you know, if you're watching live with us, and there's lots of you on here, feel free to if you have questions and want to push back on something, please put that in the comments, and we'd love to answer any questions you have. All right, so number 3.
Yeah, or creative ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, or ideas for sure. All right, the third thing we want to talk about out of the 10 that are in the checklist is children and youth class sizes. So this is another area where we all know the reality is that kids, it's really hard to control germ spread with kids, right? No matter how much space they have to run around. But we can minimize the risk as much as possible. And there's also an appearance thing that you want to deal with. So if a parent is bringing their kid to church, maybe it's the first time they will have gone back to church, or maybe the first time they've been in a church in a long time, once these restrictions are lifted, and they bring their kid to a class, and their kid's not been in school since March, and they come walk up to your Sunday school classroom for the kid, and it's like someone kicked an ant pile with kids in it, and the room is overflowing with children. That's going to be not good from a public health perspective, for sure, but also just from a public relations perspective. It's just not going to look right. So you want to always appear like you're going above and beyond with children's ministry, and you should always go above and beyond with children's ministry. So we need to start rethinking children and youth class sizes. How many kids are allowed in a particular classroom? So let's talk through what are some of the ways that we can begin to mitigate that issue and reduce the size of a class.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two. I'm going to think of two primary ways, and there'll be lots of little nuance and different ways you can do this. But kind of the two main things that have come to mind for me are going to be, number one, having some older kids maybe that would normally be segregated during your Sunday morning service into their own age group programming to just be in the worship service with their parents. So that's one way of reducing the number of additional spaces that you need to manage, and you can choose whatever age group that might be. The other one is to, again, like we said in for your main worship service, utilizing other spaces. So it could be that, if you've got a facility that does have lots of classroom space or adequate classroom space, and some of that was for adult Sunday school classes, maybe instead utilize those for kids so that you could have, only 8 kids in a room instead of 14, and just use other spaces. And again, family life centers, fellowship halls, some of these larger spaces, you could even just quarter them off so that, there's plenty of walking distance, and, you got some tables and chairs over here in each corner, and all of a sudden you can turn your fellowship hall into 4 classrooms or 6 classroom spaces. It's not ideal. You don't have, sound barriers, between groups, but you can social distance that way, and you can still get kids together where they can at least be with their peers. So those are the 2 primary ones that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, Dan has a good question. He said, since schools are closed, and all the way through the summer there'll be no school, why have kids classes at all? And that's a great question, Dan. I mean, there may be some churches that make the call and say, we're not going to do kids classes. We're going to have kids sit with their parents, or people are going to continue who don't feel safe are going to continue to stream from home. It's my opinion and feeling that a lot of families are going to want their kids to be able to play with other kids, because there are going to be a lot of people who feel like, the risk for kids is really low, and, shouldn't we let the kids play? And I think that's going to be a church by church decision, as it absolutely should be. And everybody should make their own decision for what's best for their church and for their community. So that's a really great question, Dan. AJ, another option, depending on where you live in the country and what weather permits, is to do some Sunday school classes outside. Set up, have people donate their little pop-up tent so you can have some shade, and make sure, obviously, you want to make sure it's safe. If you're right next to a busy road, you don't want to do a Sunday school class next to, lots of traffic. Yeah. But assuming you've got a safe space to do that, that's another thing that people are going to feel like it's more safe. There's some wind blowing, and
I love that. Yeah, that obviously that's not for everybody, but boy, if that can be for you, I love that. I'm an advocate of kids being outside anyway. And so, I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Kim asks, what about keeping toys cleaned and sanitized? Absolutely. In fact, that might be, Kim, another thing that just comes off. We just go, we're not doing toys, especially in those classes where the kids are more likely to put the toys in their mouth and to slobber on them and things like that. Maybe we just don't have those kinds of toys out. And in classes where kids will play with them but not necessarily put them in their mouth, we might have an additional cleaning regimen. That goes back to point number 1 of have a really good cleaning regimen that's dependent upon each room, and have that posted somewhere very visible so that parents who are dropping their kids off can see, oh, look at all the things they're doing to keep this room clean. All right, let's move on, AJ, to number 4. I'm excited about this one, actually. It is, we need to build out a sustainable online groups strategy. So for context here, I'm still seeing, this is not universally true. So if you're watching, there's lots of you watching live right now, and this is not universally true. But a lot of churches, their online group strategy, AJ, is very much like a Band-Aid. We're only doing this because we have to. That they have like duct taped it together. No judgment on that. We're all just trying to survive at the moment. But online small groups are not going away, probably not even after coronavirus goes away, because I think people are discovering that this is a good option. So we need to start building out a sustainable online group strategy. I know you've got some good thoughts on this, AJ, so what does that look like, taking it from sort of a duct-taped together thing to something that's sustainable?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I really think we are going to need to see more kind of a top-down approach on this. I think it needs to be thought out at the leadership level of the church, and then disseminated down through the ranks, through your small group leaders. I really would like to see churches take a more active leadership position on their small group ministries. I've seen so many that really have really just fallen silent. I mean, they've had small groups going for a while, and they've just been totally silent. And so the groups, some of the leaders have said, well, let's meet, and others have not, or they've been inconsistent on times or methodology. And I really want to encourage all of you pastors watching right now to really take hold of the leadership of your groups and come up with a plan to get them just meeting consistently, just like you would want them to do weekly if they were meeting in people's homes or in spaces on campus. And there's so many good options out there. I mean, we just talked a couple weeks ago about using Zoom for meetings and using an app called, is it called Band, Scott? Just Band?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's called Band App. Yep.
Yeah, which is a really good communications tool for groups to use. You don't have to use those. There's a lot of other solutions out there. But I think you really need to get your small group leaders together, talk about when are you going to meet, what method are you going to use, or tell them when they're going to meet and what method they're going to use if need be. And then make sure these things are happening. And if you had not previously been maybe even giving talking points or things to be praying about or talking through, then I really love that approach as well. Not heavy-handed or taking all freedom away from them, because groups need to have their own personality as well. But I really do want you to really consider leading in a greater capacity with your groups. It's such a huge asset to your church. It's a huge asset for your church from a volunteer perspective, because people more involved with small groups are going to be more involved with volunteering. It's a huge asset for them growing in maturity, growing in relationship with one another. It's a huge asset for meeting the needs of your community from a volunteer standpoint. It's such a lifeline to your church and to the world for you to be organized in this way. Really, there's a huge opportunity being missed right now that I'm just seeing people are just waiting it out.
Yeah.
You can't do that. We're going to be in this for too long. And going forward, I'm not saying, do this now and then stop doing it later. I'm saying just get it started, keep doing it forever.
Yeah. Josh has a good point. I don't know if people are going to be able to read this. Just realized that the text is really dark here. But Josh Fortney said that we need to have unique training. Here we go. I've changed that to white. Well, hold on. I'm going to add it back. Unique training for hosts.
On the fly production here.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's how you know it's live. Needs to be unique training for hosts for digital groups. It's a whole different way to facilitate conversation. You are 100% right. And this goes back to what AJ was saying with churches needing to take more of a leadership role. Like, train them, tell them, show them. How do you do that? How do you lead an online group well? How do we facilitate that conversation in a different and better way? So this isn't going away. We have long lamented. In fact, hit the like button if you've ever felt like, I wish there was a good solution to people who have to travel and people who take their kids on travel soccer and travel sports. Yeah. We wish that there was a good solution for engaging these people who have to be physically away all the time, or choose to be physically away from church all the time. If you've ever felt that way, we're discovering that this is a really good option. Now, the pushback has always been that it's I'm seeing those likes coming now. The pushback has always been that it's like some sort of a fake community. If it's digital, it's not real. Well, we have all learned from this experience that that's not true. That digital community is real community. It may not be our number one preferred option, but it's not invalid. And so, as AJ was saying, like, it behooves you to develop that strategy and have a sustainable one moving forward. Okay, our last one that we're going to talk about in the podcast today is we need to refocus our programming on the essential. I was actually, AJ, having a meeting today with one of the churches that I'm working with, and there were some concerns for them about, well, we really need to focus our energy and effort on what needs to change just right this second. For this immediate need of when we can first go back to church, and let's press pause on the things that need to happen further down the road. And my pushback to that was, those should not be two separate conversations, right?
Yeah.
Your church has never been more open to change than it is right now. And so it's not that you should not talk about the temporary changes you need to make, but you should talk about them in tandem with and streamline that with the changes that you get to make for the long term. So we should be having these conversations concurrently, not one and then the other. We need to be having these conversations at the same time. You will never get the opportunity to reinvent your church that you have right this minute. And we should not squander this opportunity. And so it's kind of I did label this thing simple tasks. This is not a simple task. It's a big task, but simply put, you should start doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. This really starts to drive into discipleship pathway right here. Whenever we're working with the church and we come to that point in our process, discipleship pathway is where we talk through what are the primary things that we're going to do to help people, become mature disciples, to become disciple makers themselves. And this is the time to be having this conversation. If you have not had a clear pathway in your church, now's the time to do it, because this is when you've already stripped away everything, right? I mean, you're down to worship service and maybe small groups. You've cut out everything else. Well, congratulations. You now have 2 steps of a very simplified discipleship pathway in your church. So whether you knew that you had just completed that task or not, you have. And now, to use a great analogy that Scott always talks about with churches, it's like cleaning out your garage. You take everything out. It's all over the driveway. And now you're getting your shelves and everything set, all your hooks and, everything's nice and neat. Then you bring back in the things, only the keepers. Everything else is going to Goodwill or the garage sale or free for crash. So
AJ, I love that you brought up that metaphor, because it's basically what this is like, is it's like your garage flooded. Like you didn't want to clean your garage out.
Yeah.
And so the churches that are saying, you know what, let's just try to get through the flood. You're not thinking long term enough. You had to get everything out of the garage anyway because the garage flooded. Yeah. So now you're never going to get another chance where you can create a new system for organizing the stuff in your garage and only put back the things that fit. And so, yeah, you have temporarily found a place to park your car, and that's where we're at right now. But you get to reorganize your garage right now. And so don't go, well, we're just trying to figure out what we're going to do to continue to park the car, and then we'll worry about reorganizing the garage later. No. Everything's already out of the garage, so let's reorganize it now. Now is the perfect time.
You've got the car and the lawnmower in there, and all, your 40 rakes are out there in the driveway, and your old rusted junk parts. So, yeah, this is what we love helping churches do, because it's so eye-opening, and to streamline and prioritize essential ministries for the greatest impact on your people in the world is like you said, this is a great time to do that. So, and we can help you do that. You can please connect with us if you would like to begin that process. And we're going to talk more about this next week on the webinar as well on April 28th.
Which we haven't brought up.
And we'll get to all the links and everything.
Yeah, so here's one thing. Okay, I want to add this to the broadcast here. So Tim has asked a great question, which is, we have folks basically saying that the thing that they miss most about church is all the things that they're familiar with, and they're ready to get back to that familiarity. So how do we balance that dynamic between leveraging this opportunity to change and then giving people that sense of normalcy when we are able to get back together? I think some of this is pastoral. Tim and Justin Carpenter echoed that. Some of this is pastoral, right? The best analogy, most analogous thing I can find would be like September 11th, right? Where, and I'm not comparing this to September 11th by any means, but there are some parallels. We knew that there was never going to be a return to everything being exactly the same. Like now it's just expected. Like you're going to have to show your driver's license when you go into certain buildings, and you're going to have to walk through a scanner. And we never used to have to take off our shoes to go through the security line in an airport. Like these are all things that we've just know that life's different now. And it's not necessarily worse, right? Like it's just different. And I do think that you used the word grieving, Tim, and that's what it is. It's a grieving. But a pastor at our church was preaching this Sunday. founding pastor of our church, and he said we've got to punish the pain by turning it into progress, and I think that that's true for churches too. If we don't come through the other end of this thing different, then it really was a wasted opportunity. It really was. And our pastor made a great point that I was really convicted by, which is that we're hearing a lot about nursing homes, for example. It's so sad that these people can't get visitors, and our pastor pointed out they weren't getting visitors anyway. What we've shown is that these folks were isolated to begin with and lonely, and now we all have had a moment to experience that loneliness and what that's like to not be able to be around the people we love and not to be surrounded by. So I guess what I'd say, Tim and Justin and others who are wondering, I think that doing things different doesn't mean doing things worse. In fact, it means we can do things better. And the things that people miss the most about church in person are the relationships, are the care. And if we can emphasize that we can do those things better by doing them differently, then I think that we can navigate this moment. I don't want to suggest it'll be easy. It'll be hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I would add to that. What is more difficult? First of all, let me just say this from my my less than empathetic default. Leaders lead. And so if we're just camped out, if we're camping our leadership out and just waiting, to go back to normal and to preserve feelings, then I think we're missing the point on leading well. And what's worse, to have somebody come back into as close to the same as possible in an unproductive ministry space to preserve their feelings, or to have them come back to something that's better, that will have a greater impact on them personally and on the world around them. But have to deal with a little bit of emotional fallout in that. I would point to the latter. I would say, be the leader then that can, that they can grieve with, and that you can help through a shorter period of time into betterment, instead of just managing old stuff that didn't really have much of a point to it.
Yeah. Let me clarify something for AJ. That doesn't mean that Tim or Justin, who asked, had unproductive ministry settings. So let's just clarify that.
No. If your church was doing well and you had a really fantastic discipleship pathway, and you're doing this, and you know what it all means and how it works, keep doing that. Yeah. Tweak only what you need to. Right. But a lot of our audience are going to be people that haven't ever thought through any of these things, or in a long time, sure. And they've gotten cluttered with a lot of unnecessary programming.
That's right.
And losing some of those things will be beneficial to you. So
going back to the main point of this bullet point, the fifth one here that we want to tackle, it's that we want to refocus our programming on the essentials. So a pastoral question that I would ask is, when people say that they miss the normalcy, ask the follow-up question of, tell me about that. What is it that you miss the most? And then they might tell you, well, I miss the potlucks, and then ask the next step question, which is, why do you miss those things? What about those things do you miss? I guarantee you they're not going to say, well, I just really miss Susie's baked mac and cheese. Like, that's probably not what they're going to say. They're going to say, I really miss, that community, that fellowship, that authentic relationship with people. And so, or I miss being able to study the Bible with people that I know and love and care about. So we don't want to abandon those things. We look at Acts chapter 2 and see those as essential to ministry. If we ever get to a place where we have abandoned authentic relationships and studying the Word together and prayer and serving one another and care, then that's a bad thing. We should not abandon those things for the sake of simple church. In fact, we move towards a more streamlined model so that we can enhance our ability to do those things, not decrease.
Exactly.
So, on that note, let's say this: this is exactly the topic that we're going to be tackling in next week's webinar. We're doing a webinar called Reimagining Our 2020 Vision. I imagine that most of you went into 2020 with some sort of a 2020 vision, and then coronavirus had a different idea. of what 2020 was going to look like. And so we need to reimagine our 2020 visions and realign them. And so next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, so not our 2 p.m. time, but at 11 a.m. Eastern, we're going to be doing a webinar specifically on these questions and really diving deep into this last point that we've made. How can we do this? How can we look at what's not changed? How can we look at what has to change? And how can we look at what gets to change? Is kind of the layout for that training. And if you'll go right now to malfersgroup.com/36, malfersgroup.com/36, that's where you can sign up to get all 10 points of this checklist, download the checklist, and then just to peek ahead for you, as soon as you download the checklist, you're going to be prompted to register for the webinar as well, if you're interested in that training next week. So malfersgroup.com/36. In fact, let me just put this in the comments right now. Malfers Group. Oh, can I spell Malfers Group? malfersgroup.com/36. Yes, it is. Actually, I'll you know what? Sometimes when with the redirects, we get funky. People complain on Facebook that it doesn't work sometimes on Facebook because Facebook does something with them. So I'm gonna attach the longer URL there. But if you're listening to the podcast, if you're listening to like a replay of it, you definitely can just type in your browser malfersgroup.com/36. It's going to take you to a little form for your name and email. Download the checklist, and it'll prompt you to also register for the webinar if you'd like to participate in that. I'm excited about next week's webinar. It's going to be really good, helping tackle this last point. So let's recap. AJ, of the 10 things that are in the checklist, we reviewed 5 here today. What was number 1?
Enhancing your cleaning regimen.
Yes.
Making sure that all your spaces are ready all the time.
Ready all the time. That's right. Number 2, add a service
Number 2 was,
venue. Sorry.
Yep. Managing your services, utilizing your space, and being able to manage a smaller amount of people being able to be on campus.
That's right. So just have a plan for this, because eventually we're going to get clear orders on how many people are allowed to congregate. Some folks are still going to watch online, and they should, because they're vulnerable or whatever. But for the folks that can meet in person, have a plan to, be able to meet in person given the size restrictions that you're going to have. Assuming it's above like 25. If that limit is 50 or 100, and your church is larger than that, have a plan for multiple services or venues. Okay, what was the third thing, AJ?
Similar to number 2, but in regards to children and youth sizes. So just being able to keep kids from being in gigantic groups also, and again, utilizing space as best you can, or maybe resetting what ages are going to be in your main worship service with parents, as opposed to into age-segregated groups.
Yep, and maybe not having, you may decide to go back to having worship services and not have children's ministry right away, maybe apart from nursery or something like that. Number 4 was build out a sustainable online group strategy. We think this is a win for the church long term, not just in this moment. So if you've been only kind of had a tattered, duct-taped strategy up to this point, now it's time to invest some time, energy, effort, resources, and leadership into a sustainable online group strategy. And then AJ, close us out. Number 5, the last one.
Yeah, finally re-examining your programming so that you can maximize and emphasize what really is core and essential for discipleship in your church, to make sure that people are effectively maturing in their faith and living out their faith and becoming disciple makers. So clean out the garage, bring back in the essentials, and that will serve you well from this point forward.
That's right. So I just want to remind you, go to malfersgroup.com/36 to get all 10 things that we cover. There's 5 whole more things that we did not tackle in today's podcast that you can read about, and sign up for the webinar next Tuesday happening at 11 a.m. And 11 a.m. Eastern. And we'd love to see you on there. Guys, we love you so much. We're praying for you. We're in your corner. We will get through this, and I have a lot of hope that we're going to come out the other end of this thing better than when we went into it.
That's the opportunity before us.
All right. We'll see you guys next week, hopefully at the webinar.